The morning sun streams through my kitchen window as I struggle to get my 7-year-old son Alex ready for school. It's 7 a.m., and I'm fighting back tears again. At 34, being a widow wasn't part of my life plan, but here I am. 8 months have passed since we lost Ryan in that horrible construction site accident, though sometimes it feels like yesterday. The first few months after Ryan's death blur together in my memory, an endless cycle of paperwork, tears, and sleepless nights. I honestly don't know how I would have survived without Linda and David, my in-laws. They've been absolute angels, picking up Alex from school every day so I can focus on my work as a project manager. Without fail, when I stop by their house to get him, Linda tries to help financially. "Emily, please take this," she said last week, attempting to slip an envelope into my purse. Her kind eyes met mine, filled with concern and love. "Linda, I really can't," I protested, pushing the envelope back. "Sweetie, we want to help," she insisted. "We know the insurance company paid well, but your family. Let us do this." She's right about the insurance. The company paid out $300,000 after Ryan's death. Between that and my job, we're managing okay financially. But with Linda and David, it's never been about the money. It's about the pure, unconditional love they show us every single day. If only my own parents showed half as much support. Mom and Dad have always made it clear that my older sister Jessica was their golden child, and now they extend that same favoritism to her kids over Alex. Last weekend was typical. Alex was excited to see his grandparents, but within 20 minutes, Mom was complaining about his curiosity. "Why does the clock make that sound?" Alex asked, pointing to their antique grandfather clock. "How does it work inside?" "Emily, can't you control him?" Mom sighed, rolling her eyes. "He's always asking questions about everything. Jessica's kids never give us this much trouble." Dad nodded in agreement, reaching for his laptop. "Here, Alex, why don't you play some games instead?" "Look, I downloaded some new ones." But Alex didn't want games. He wanted to talk, to learn, to connect. Meanwhile, Jessica's 3 kids sat in the corner, completely absorbed in their phones, barely acknowledging anyone's presence. And somehow, my parents held this up as the ideal behavior. I've learned to bite my tongue. Growing up as the less favored child, I got used to these comparisons long ago. Now I just shake my head and stay silent when they praise Jessica's parenting while criticizing mine. At least they help occasionally with Alex, watching him when I have late meetings or picking him up if both Linda and David are busy. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday dinner at my parents' house, but the warning signs were there from the moment I walked in. Mom had made my favorite lasagna, which she usually only does when she wants something. Dad was unusually chatty, asking about work, about Alex, about everything really. They were building up to something, I just didn't know what. "So Emily," Mom said carefully, cutting her lasagna into perfect squares, "we've been meaning to ask you something. How much was Ryan's life insurance payout?" The question hit me like a slap in the face. I nearly choked on my water, completely blindsided by such a direct inquiry about something so personal. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe I was just tired of keeping secrets from my parents, but I answered honestly. "About $300,000, I said quietly. The fork in Mom's hand clattered against her plate. Dad's head snapped up so fast I thought he might hurt himself. They stared at me like I'd just announced I'd won the lottery. "Well," Mom said, putting down her fork deliberately, "what are you planning to do with all that money?" I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. "I've invested it," I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's for Alex's future, his college education, maybe help him buy an apartment when he's older. Ryan and I always talked about. But that's years away," Dad interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. "You should be thinking about the present, Emily. About yourself and your family." The way he said family made it clear he wasn't talking about Alex. "You could do so much with that money now," Mom chimed in, leaning forward eagerly. "You could help your family, people who need it today, not save it all for some distant future that might not even—" "I'm not discussing my money anymore," I cut her off, my voice sharper than intended. The silence that followed was deafening. They both sat back, Dad's face clouding over with that familiar disappointment I'd seen so many times growing up. Mom pressed her lips together in that thin line that always meant trouble. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence, broken only by the scraping of forks against plates. I thought that would be the end of it. Knowing my parents, I expected them to give me the silent treatment for at least a month, It's what they always did when I didn't live up to their expectations. But to my surprise, Mom called just a week later. "We're having a family dinner on Sunday," she announced, her voice warm as if nothing had happened. "Jessica and the kids will be there too. You have to come, sweetie." Something about her tone made me uneasy, but I agreed. When I arrived that Sunday, Jessica was already there with her 3 kids, all of them glued to their phones as usual. As we sat down to eat, she started talking about rising prices, bills piling up, and how hard it was to make ends meet these days. "Everything is just so expensive now," she sighed, passing the potatoes. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, talking about rising grocery prices and utility bills. Jessica cleared her throat and sat up straighter. "I've been thinking," she announced, looking around the table with that same self-righteous expression she'd worn since we were kids. "Emily and I should help Mom and Dad financially. I'll send them $500 every month. I wish I could do more, but you know how it is. Mike's the only one working, and with 3 kids. She trailed off, letting that sink in before turning to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "But you, Emily, you should send them $1,000 monthly." "Excuse me?" I nearly choked on my water. "Well, it makes sense," Jessica pressed on. "You earn really well at your job, and you only have 1 child to support. Plus, with your situation, you have other income now." My blood boiled at her careful avoidance of mentioning Ryan's death directly. I wanted to scream that I was a widow, that I didn't have a husband's income to rely on anymore, that the other income she was referring to was meant for my son's future. But Mom was already clapping her hands in delight, and Dad was beaming like it was Christmas morning. "Oh, girls," Mom exclaimed, "you don't know what this means to us." I sat there, torn between anger and disbelief, watching my family's expectant faces. The words of refusal died in my throat. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn their approval, and here they were, putting a price tag on it. "Fine," I heard myself say. "I'll do it." The first transfer hurt the most. $1,000 gone with a few clicks. I told myself it was worth it if it meant more family support with Alex, but that fantasy quickly unraveled. Every time I needed help, there was an excuse. "Mom, could you pick Alex up from school today? Linda has a doctor's appointment, and I have a late meeting." "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry." Mom's voice crackled through the phone. "I've got such a headache today." You know how my migraines get. This became a pattern. Every time I needed help with Alex, there was an excuse. Mom was too busy, she was tired, she had errands to run, her back was acting up. Meanwhile, the $1,000 left my account like clockwork every month. One particularly frustrating Thursday, after Mom claimed she couldn't watch Alex because she might be coming down with something, I called Linda in desperation. "Of course we'll pick him up," Linda said without hesitation. "David's already heading to the school. He loves their little chats on the drive home. Alex has been telling him all about their science project." I hung up the phone and sat at my desk fighting back tears. $1,000 a month bought me nothing but excuses from my own mother, while my mother-in-law dropped everything to help without asking for a penny. December crept up on me that year. We'd always spent Christmas at my parents' house. It was tradition. The whole family gathered there, exchanging gifts and sharing meals. The call came exactly a week before Christmas. I was helping Alex with his homework when my phone lit up with Mom's number. "Emily, honey," she started, using that syrupy sweet tone that always preceded bad news. "About Christmas Eve. We've decided to do something different this year. We're having an adults-only party. No children allowed." The pencil I was holding snapped in my hand. "What?" "It's just that we want to do something more sophisticated this year," Mom continued, as if she was discussing something as trivial as changing dinner plans. "You know, wine, adult conversation. But it's Christmas," the first protested, moving away so Alex couldn't hear. "What am I supposed to do with Alex?" "Oh, that's easy," she replied, her voice light and dismissive. "You can leave him with Linda and David. They'd love to have him, I'm sure. You'll come by around 7? After hanging up, I stared at Alex, who was still working on his math problems, completely unaware that his grandmother had just uninvited him from Christmas. My heart ached watching him concentrate on his multiplication tables, his tongue sticking out just like Ryan's used to do. I spent the next week debating what to do. The thought of celebrating without Alex felt wrong, but skipping the family Christmas entirely seemed too dramatic. Finally, I came up with a compromise. I'd leave Alex with Linda and David for a few hours. make an appearance at my parents' house to exchange gifts and greetings, then head back to celebrate properly with my in-laws and son. On Christmas Eve, I pulled up to my parents' house alone, a bag of carefully wrapped presents in hand. The driveway was full of cars, more than usual for our family gatherings. Walking up to the front door, I could hear laughter and Christmas music spilling out into the cold December air. I opened the door, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. The house was packed with relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, but that wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. There, running through the living room with paper crowns on their heads, were Jessica's 3 kids. Near the Christmas tree, I spotted my cousin Sarah's children helping themselves to cookies. More kids appeared in my line of sight. My cousin Mark's twins, my cousin Susan's teenager. The room suddenly felt too hot, too tight. I stood in the doorway, the gift bag hanging limply from my hand, as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't an adults-only party at all. It was a party where only my son wasn't welcome. Aunt Marie was the first to spot me. "Emily, sweetheart." She rushed over to hug me, then looked around expectantly. "Where's little Alex? Don't tell me he's sick on Christmas Eve." Before I could answer, my cousin Peter chimed in. "Yeah, where's our favorite little scientist? Jake's been wanting to show him his new chemistry set." More relatives gathered around, all asking the same question. Where was Alex? Why had I come alone? Each inquiry felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I couldn't form words, couldn't explain what I didn't understand myself. Through the crowd, I spotted my mother in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a Christmas-themed platter as if everything was perfectly normal, as if she hadn't just excluded her only grandson from a family celebration. "Excuse me," I managed to say, pushing past my concerned relatives. My feet carried me to the kitchen on autopilot, anger building with each step. "Mom," I said, my voice low and controlled. "Can we talk privately?" Something in my tone made her put down the platter. I led her into the hallway, away from prying eyes and ears. "You told me this was an adults-only party," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You specifically told me not to bring Alex. So why are Jessica's kids here? Why are all the cousins' children here?" Mom straightened her Christmas sweater, not meeting my eyes. "Well, that's different." "Different how?" "Those children," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the living room, "know how to behave at formal gatherings. They're well-mannered." I stared at her in disbelief. "Well-mannered?" "Alex is one of the most polite children I know. His teachers praise his behavior constantly. Linda and David always say." "Oh, Linda and David," Mom interrupted, rolling her eyes. "They spoil him, encourage all those endless questions. The other children, they deserve to be here more. They know their place." As if on cue, a commotion erupted from the dining room. Jessica's youngest son, Kevin, had grabbed a handful of deviled eggs and was throwing them at his sister. The eggs sailed across the room, splattering against Emily's new Christmas dress as she shrieked. I turned back to my mother, raising an eyebrow. Yes, I can clearly see their superior manners on display. Mom's face hardened. That's just children being children. But when Alex asks questions about how things work, that's unacceptable behavior. Don't be so dramatic, Emily. He's fine with Linda and David. I'm leaving, I announced, turning toward the door. I'm going back to my son. Mom shrugged, examining her manicure. Fine, leave if you want to make a scene. But put your gifts under the tree first. We're opening them after dinner. Something snapped inside me as I stood there, watching my mother's dismissive shrug. Before I could second-guess myself, I walked into the center of the living room. I cleared my throat loudly, the sound cutting through the holiday music and chatter. Heads turned, conversations died mid-sentence, and suddenly, all eyes were on me. "Several of you have asked why I came alone tonight," I began, my voice stronger than I expected. "Why Alex isn't here celebrating Christmas with his family." Jessica started to move toward me, but I held up my hand. "Let me finish. I'm here alone because a week ago, Mom called and told me this was an adults-only party. I was specifically told not to bring Alex." "What?" Aunt Marie's voice cut through the silence. "But all the children are here," Uncle Steve added, looking confused. Mom stepped forward, her face flushed. "Emily, this isn't the time." "Oh, I think this is exactly the time," I continued, my voice rising slightly. "Because you see, there wasn't really a ban on children. There was a ban on one child, my son, who apparently isn't good enough for this family's Christmas celebration. The room erupted in murmurs. I saw shocked faces, disapproving looks directed at my parents, and confused children watching the adult drama unfold. But that's not even the best part, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. While my son isn't good enough to attend Christmas, I'm apparently good enough to send my parents $1,000 every month. And Jessica here sends $500. Jessica's husband, Mike's head, snapped up. Wait, what? What $500? The color drained from Jessica's face as Mike turned to her. You're sending your parents money every month? From where? Our account barely covers the bills as it is. Jessica's composure cracked. Her face flushed red as she looked between our parents and her husband. I never actually sent any money, she stammered. Mom and Dad asked me to say I was sending $500 so Emily would agree to help them financially. They said if she thought I was contributing too. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched comprehension dawn on my relatives' faces as they pieced together what had happened. How my parents and sister had manipulated me into supporting them while simultaneously excluding my child from family events. You're telling me, Aunt Caroline's voice rang out, sharp and clear, that you scammed your own daughter out of thousands of dollars? You're nothing but con artists, using your own daughter like an ATM while treating her kid like dirt. That's low, even for you two. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some expressing disgust, others demanding explanations. Jessica was trying to explain herself to an increasingly angry Mike, while my parents stood there, their carefully crafted facade crumbling around them. I raised my hand, silencing the ongoing arguments around me. I had something else to say. The room fell quiet again, all eyes returning to me. Mom and Dad stood frozen by the Christmas tree, their faces ashen. Jessica was still trying to explain herself to Mike, but even they stopped to listen. From this moment on, I said, my voice steady and clear, I will no longer be sending you any money, and I won't be maintaining any relationship with you or Jessica. I'm done. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, leaving the bag of gifts by the door. The sound of the door closing behind me felt final, like the ending of a chapter I should have finished long ago. Sitting in my car, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. With a few quick taps, I canceled the monthly transfer to my mother's account. It felt like cutting off a chain I'd been dragging behind me for months. The drive to Linda and David's house seemed to take both forever and no time at all. When I pulled into their driveway, I could see Alex through the window, helping Linda decorate Christmas cookies. The sight of him, happy and loved, brought tears to my eyes. We spent the rest of Christmas Eve with Linda and David, decorating cookies, singing carols, and watching Alex's eyes light up as he helped David arrange the nativity scene. This, I realized, was what family should feel like. The next morning, while Alex was still asleep surrounded by the presents Santa had brought, my phone rang. It was Aunt Caroline. You might want to hear how things ended last night, she said without preamble. After you left, it was like a dam broke. Uncle Mike stood up and said he couldn't stay in the house another minute. Then Aunt Marie and Uncle Steve followed. Pretty soon, everyone was gathering their coats and kids. I listened as she described how the relatives had left en masse, not even bothering to say goodbye to my parents. Some had apparently made very loud comments about manipulative behavior and family shame as they walked out. And Mike? I asked quietly. Oh, honey, he was livid. Packed up the kids right there and then. Told Jessica he needed time to think about their marriage. Said he was taking the children to his parents' house for Christmas. She paused. Jessica was crying. Your parents were trying damage control, but it was too late. I could hear her take a deep breath. I want you to know, Emily, we're all on your side. What they did to you and Alex, it's unforgivable. After hanging up, I sat on my bed processing everything. My phone started buzzing with notifications, text messages from Mom, Dad, and Jessica. They all said variations of the same thing. We're sorry. We were wrong. Please talk to us. We can explain. I read each message once, then archived them without responding. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a peaceful blur. Alex and I spent quiet evenings with Linda and David, played board games, watched holiday movies, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of being with people who truly loved us both. Then, on New Year's Eve morning, the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Mom and Dad standing on my porch, clutching a large, elaborately wrapped package. My heart thumped against my ribs as I debated whether to open the door. Emily, we know you're home, Mom called out, her voice muffled through the door. Please, we just want to talk. After a moment's hesitation, I opened the door but stayed firmly in the doorway, blocking their entrance. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than they had a week ago. "We brought this for Alex," Dad said, holding out the package. Through the wrapping paper, I could see the logo of an expensive electronics store. "He doesn't need it," I replied, making no move to take the gift. "Please, Emily." Mom stepped forward. "We know we were wrong. The way we treated Alex, the manipulation with the money, we're truly sorry. And we want you to know," Dad added quickly, "that this isn't about the money you were sending us. We really do feel terrible about everything." I studied their faces, searching for sincerity. "Are you sorry because you realize what you did was wrong? Or are you sorry because the entire family knows what you did and won't speak to you anymore?" They exchanged glances, and in that brief look I had my answer. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "I don't believe you, and I don't trust you. Not anymore." "But we're family," Mom protested, tears welling up in her eyes. "No," I shook my head. "Family doesn't manipulate each other. Family doesn't exclude a child from Christmas. Family doesn't scheme and lie to get money. What you did, that's not family." They left eventually, still clutching the unwanted gift, their apologies trailing behind them as they walked to their car. I watched them drive away, feeling not sadness but relief. In the background, I could hear Alex's laughter as he played with the new science kit Linda and David had given him for Christmas. The sound reminded me that sometimes the family you're born with isn't the family you need. Sometimes the best family is the one that chooses you, loves you, and accepts you exactly as you are. In the months that followed, I stuck to my decision. I didn't answer their calls or respond to their texts. Jessica tried reaching out too, but I blocked her number. The money I had been sending to my parents went into Alex's college fund instead. The funny thing about cutting toxic people out of your life is how much room it makes for better relationships to grow. Aunt Caroline started inviting us over for Sunday dinners. Uncle Steve and his wife had us over for barbecues where Alex could play with his cousins. Everyone made a point of including him, asking about his interests, encouraging his questions. "Mom, why does Uncle Steve's pool have that funny smell?" Alex asked one summer afternoon. "That's the chlorine, buddy," Uncle Steve answered before I could, launching into an explanation about water treatment and chemical reactions that had Alex fascinated. I watched my son bloom under the attention and love of family members who actually wanted to know him, not change him. He started calling Linda and David Grandma and Grandpa exclusively now, and they continued to be our rocks, our safe harbor in any storm. One evening, as I watched Alex helping David build a model airplane in their garage, Linda sat beside me on the porch swing. "You know," she said softly, "Ryan would be so proud of you both. The way you've protected Alex, the way you've stood up for what's right, that's exactly what he would have done." Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I miss him so much," I whispered. Sometimes I still reach for the phone to tell him something funny Alex did, or I turn to share a joke with him, and then I remember. Linda squeezed my hand. "He's still with you, honey." In Alex's curiosity, in his smile, in the way he sticks his tongue out when he's concentrating, just like his daddy used to do. Through the garage window, we could hear Alex asking David detailed questions about wing aerodynamics and air resistance. David answered each one patiently, encouraging Alex's natural curiosity about how things worked. 2 years have passed since that Christmas Eve, when I finally stood up to my parents. The insurance money remains safely invested for Alex's future, growing steadily just like Ryan and I had planned. Our family might be smaller now, but it's stronger, built on love instead of obligation, acceptance instead of judgment. Sometimes I still catch myself thinking about my parents and Jessica, wondering if they've changed, if they've learned anything from what happened. But then I look at Alex, thriving in an environment where his questions are welcomed, where his personality is celebrated, not criticized, and I know I made the right choice. Last week, Alex came home from school bursting with excitement about his science fair project. "Mom, can Grandpa David help me build a working model of a hydraulic lift?" He said he knows all about fluid dynamics from his engineering days. As I watched him sketch out his plans, his face alight with enthusiasm, I thought about how different things might have been if I'd stayed trapped in my parents' toxic web of manipulation. Alex might have learned to suppress his curiosity, to doubt himself, to believe he wasn't good enough, just as I had for so many years. Instead, he's growing up surrounded by people who cherish his inquisitive nature, who answer his endless questions with patience and encouragement, who show him every day what real family love looks like. Ryan would indeed be proud, not just of Alex, but of me too. It took losing him to find my strength, to learn that being a good parent sometimes means making hard choices, setting firm boundaries, and choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. As I sit here now, watching Alex and David put the finishing touches on their model airplane, I realize that this right here is what Ryan and I always dreamed of for our son. Not just financial security, but emotional security. Not just a house, but a home filled with love and acceptance. The path here wasn't easy, and it wasn't the one I would have chosen. But as Alex runs over to show me how the airplane's propeller works, his eyes shining with the same passionate curiosity that used to light up his father's face, I know we're exactly where we need to be. Sometimes the family you're meant to have isn't the one you're born into, it's the one you build, one piece at a time, with people who choose to love you exactly as you are. Story 2. After 12 years of running my father's company, I finally made it worth $75 million. During a family meal, my father grinned at me and said, "Your brother will now take over." My heart sunk, but I smiled back. The next morning at work altered everything. After 12 years of running my father's company, I finally made it worth $75 million. At a family dinner, my dad looked at me and said, smiling, "Your brother will take over immediately." My heart sunk, but I smiled back. The next morning at work altered everything. As if he had already made up his mind before uttering the words that would alter everything, I can still picture my father's grin that evening and his proudly placed hand on my brother's shoulder. "Your brother will take over immediately." I felt my stomach drop, but years of practice kept my face composed. I smiled back as if his words didn't rip directly through me, as if they weren't unraveling. In a flash, 12 years of my life's labor. The clinking of glasses and the soft chatter of close business partners and extended relatives filled the dining area. This wasn't simply a family supper. It was a festivity, a minute to honor everything that I had accomplished and all that we had built. When I was a little boy, my father founded Harper & Company, a small logistics company that in its early years almost survived. I watched father labor late into the night, forego family holidays, and always pursue another contract to make ends meet as a child. When I was 24, fresh out of business school, he finally let me step in. Though I had to fight for that opportunity, and I had done more than just step in. By growing operations, landing multi-million-dollar contracts, and incorporating state-of-the-art technology, I had turned Harper & Company from a faltering regional logistics company into a national powerhouse. Once a tiny, almost bankrupt business, it was now a $75 million market leader. And yet, in this moment, none of it mattered. My brother Ethan was already going to take over, according to my father's decision, not me. Murmurs of congratulations were directed at Ethan as a slow wave of approval swept across the table. I watched as he dropped his gaze, faking humility. But I knew better. Ethan had never been truly invested in the business. He had spent the previous decade jumping from one unsuccessful business to another, never quite finding his feet. He wasn't interested in logistics. He was more interested in power than he was in operations. I had established Harper and the business from the bottom up, made all the difficult decisions, participated in all the late-night strategy calls, and negotiated every contract over the course of 12 years. None of it had been done by Ethan, and yet here we were. Nevertheless, I suppressed my feelings. I had long since discovered that expressing grief was a sign of weakness in this household. I steadied my hand and went for my wine glass, then raised it. "Smile, Lisa. Grin." To Ethan, I said, my voice smooth, controlled. The guests lifted their glasses, oblivious to the tempest developing behind my eyes. My mother gave me a glance from across the table, an enigmatic face, but I knew she understood. She had always noticed my effort, unlike my father. She refused to get involved, though. She didn't. And then my father, smiling with that same unflinching assurance, utterly oblivious to the fact that his decision had triggered a chain of events. From the other side of the table, Ethan looked at me with a smirk that was just barely concealed by the corner of his mouth. I realized then that my father wasn't the only one who had made this choice. This was what Ethan had been anticipating, playing the part of the obedient son who had at last discovered his purpose. He had positioned himself carefully, My father, who has always been a traditionalist, didn't see anything wrong with his reasoning. The dominion should pass to a son, a good daughter. The efforts of a daughter were always regarded as short-term, a footnote in history, despite her best efforts to show differently. However, none of them had taken into consideration the fact that I had invested 12 years in not just creating a business, but also strengthening my position within it. And tomorrow morning, they would discover exactly what it meant. I didn't get much sleep that night. Every sacrifice I had made for Harper & Company was reenacted in my memory. The relationships that fell apart due to my ambition, the late nights, and the birthdays that were missed. For this company, I had sacrificed everything, and now they expect me to just leave. By 3 a.m, when I was at my home office, typing rapidly, they had underestimated me. Each and every executive agreement, share, and contract. I was the one who understood this company's inner workings the best. Ethan believed that he would have a smooth transition and that his name would be on the office door by the following week. His job was safe. He was unaware that I was gaining considerably more valuable control while my brother and father were busy pretending to understand the company and making public appearances, respectively. As I had done for the previous 12 years, I entered Harper & Company's offices at precisely 8:45 a.m. The polished floors, the same walls, and the same level of efficiency as workers became used to their daily schedules. Today, however, was different. I didn't step into my workplace today. I was entering a combat zone. It was quite peaceful in the reception area, the silence that comes before a storm. They were aware that the murmurs had already begun. My father had made an announcement during dinner, and word of it had gone viral. Workers avoided making immediate eye contact and instead gave me uncomfortable glances. They are unsure about their allegiances. I didn't give them credit. I maintained my stance and walked with assurance, my heels tapping on the marble flooring. Don't show them that you're shaken. My office closed the door behind me as I walked in. My father and Ethan were supposed to take up their new roles as CEO and heir presumptive, and I had just 15 minutes until they arrived. It was 15 minutes until their entire scheme fell apart in their faces. I took a deep breath as I sat at my desk and turned on my computer, which displayed a list of private documents and contracts. They had believed it didn't matter and had never considered looking at one another. I retrieved my ownership documents. After a moment of my hands hovering over the keyboard, I clicked on the Executive Shareholders Agreement file. I waited after that. My door was sharply knocked at exactly 9 a.m. I didn't even try to answer. With a confident demeanor, my father and Ethan entered through the open door. He was born. Ethan's is meticulously crafted. Ethan, wearing a pricey blue suit, grinned triumphantly at me as my father walked in like a king, inspecting his empire. I had to fight the urge to chuckle. As though acknowledging me was a favor, my father responded, "Lisa," in his customary commanding tone. "You must be conscious of the change that is taking place now." "Change?" "I know it's an interesting word choice," I remarked, reclining in my chair with ease. I looked at Ethan, who continued to grin. "Excellent," my father went on, nodding as though we all agreed. "As the next CEO, Ethan will take over. You will need to assist us with the handover. Make sure he understands the procedures before you formally proceed." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on," I said, seeming to be perplexed. "Dad, I think you're incorrect about something." Anger made his face twitch. He was accustomed to my silence, to my capacity to follow orders. This was not what he had expected. "Lisa," he began in a tight voice, as though addressing a young kid. "There is no dispute about this. The choice has already been made." I grinned first, then slowly and knowingly. "Oh," I responded quietly. "I know, Dad. The problem is that you lack the power to decide that." Ethan shook his head and gave a quiet snort. "Don't make this hard, Lisa. We're attempting to take the simple route." I didn't answer. I grabbed the remote control instead and pushed a button. The document I had been looking at earlier appeared on the big screen on my office wall. An agreement amongst executive stockholders was struck on August 17, 2015. Lisa Harper, James Harper, and Father Ethan Harper signed. My dad's face went a little white. I looked across at Ethan. "Are you even familiar with this document?" He shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms. "A deal with stockholders." He made a guess. I gave a nod. "Indeed. You know what it says, too?" I highlight a key sentence with a touch of the screen. During Harper and Company's reorganization, this paper was written. It makes it very evident that the consent of all majority shareholders is necessary for any transfer of executive authority, including the appointment of a new CEO. I looked into my father's eyes. Dad owned 60% of the business. The ensuing hush was oppressive. The look on my father's face hardened. Ethan murmured, "That's not possible," and moved forward to look at the paper. "It's actually very possible," I responded with ease. "You see, throughout the years, Dad was busy acting as the patriarch of the company while you were busy failing at every startup you touched. I was engaged in another activity." I bent over. I was reserving my spot. I looked back to my dad. "Do you recall a time when you need funding to expand? In 220? In return for my investment, you agreed to give me an extra 15% of your shares. Additionally, 10% more was deposited as collateral in my name in 220 during that court dispute, which you never sought to recover. I am the dominant shareholder after that, and my initial 35%. My dad's mouth tightened. "However, Ethan was in a panic. He spat, "You must be bluffing." I took out another document. "The most current court document submitted to the state is this one. Do you want to make sure?" Ethan grabbed the paper and scanned it, the color fading from his face every second. This is not possible," he stumbled. "Tell her that she can't do this, Dad," since he knew I had legally outwitted him, and there was nothing he could do about it. My father said nothing. I stood up and let out a deep breath. I told Ethan, "I'm not firing you. I wouldn't want to force you into the actual job market, but you will report to me, and you will work under my direction. Otherwise," I pointed to the door, "you can get out now." For the first time in his life, Ethan turned to face my father with beseeching eyes, but he was at a loss for words. This cannot be fixed, since this was no longer his firm. I owned it. It was oppressively quiet in my workplace. The legal paper was still in Ethan's grasp, his fingers white from holding on so tightly. My father stood motionless beside him, his countenance inscrutable. However, I was aware he was attempting to figure out how to get out of this by being calculating. One did not exist. I had been prepared for this moment for years. Experience had taught me never to presume loyalty where power was involved, not because I had anticipated treachery. My father stared at me as though he didn't recognize me. For the first time in my life, he might not have. That's all, then. When Ethan did speak, it was in a harsh tone. "All of it is being taken by you." I laughed softly and without humor. "Taking everything." I said it again, taking a step toward him. "I started this business from scratch, Ethan. Every agreement, every growth, every invention. While you were busy failing upward, I made it happen. I was sustaining this business. Thus, I'm not taking anything. I promise." I leaned a little. "All I'm keeping is what I already have." Ethan had no argument, but his expression contorted in rage. He was aware of my correctness, and worse, my father was as well. He had spent years thinking that his kid would receive what was properly mine. That family was more important than skill. He had misjudged me. He was now having to pay for that error. The hush was finally broken by my father. "Lisa, you're doing something wrong." I could hear the tension underneath his cool, collected speech. "A family should remain united. Are you certain you want to destroy this bridge?" I looked him in the eye. "Dad," slowly, I said, "you burned this bridge the instant you made your decision without me." He made a small line with his lips. "Business is larger than simply one individual. We can come up with a solution that benefits everyone." I cocked my head, pretending to pay attention. "Yes, I do agree. I'm giving you both a choice because of this." I looked first at Ethan. "You are free to remain with the firm." I spoke in a silky voice. "Expert. You won't be the CEO, though. You will assume a limited authority advising position. You will receive a substantial compensation. But I'll be your boss." Ethan tensed. However, I continued or didn't stop. "You are free to leave. I'll pay market value for your shares. You might use the funds to start a new project that you are passionate about." My dad sneered. "It seems like you have all the cards." I grinned. "Yes, I do." My statements were followed by a heavy hush. I gave them permission to dwell in it and experience helplessness. My father finally let out a breath and shook his head, seemingly incredulous. He mumbled, "I never thought you'd do this. Not to your own relatives." His comments gave me a tremendous pain. "Not to your own relatives." I wanted to let him know that this was his fault. The fact that he had decided to ignore me, to pretend that I wasn't permanent, but I wasn't, because it didn't matter in the end. The important thing was that I refused to let them steal what I had created. Never, ever. Ethan was the first to storm out. Goodbye. I knew enough about my brother to know what he would do next. He would visit our acquaintances, family, and relations, pretending to be the victim of corporate treachery. I didn't give a damn. My goal was not to gain their favor. My goal was to secure my future here. My father waited a little longer, as though he thought I would alter my mind. But I didn't. He nodded slowly. "You've evolved." Silently, he said. I looked him in the eye. "No, father. At last, I quit playing the part." Then he went away. I sat back down in my chair and let out a breath. I ought to have felt triumphant. I had won the battle for my position. But when I glanced at the vacant doorway, I felt something else too. A persistent, silent anguish. I had always had a desire for my father's acceptance. A tiny, desperate part of me had believed that he would eventually notice me if I put in enough effort and repeatedly proved myself. In actuality, though, he had never looked. And now, he was forced to see me for who I truly was at this point, nor his daughter, nor his short-term position as Harper and Company's real boss. I shifted my attention back to my computer. I had built this business for 12 years. I would now make it untouchable for the next 12 hours. Even though my brother and father had attempted to take everything away from me, they ultimately lost everything. My workplace felt vacant for the first time in 12 years. There were no calls from my dad. Ethan didn't send any passive-aggressive emails. Nothing but quiet. However, peace was not implied by quiet. It signaled the start of the fight. I was aware that my father would not go in silence. Ethan, too. He would do whatever it took to get back what he believed to be his birthright. I wasn't gullible enough to believe that this was the end of it. It was only getting started. Employees of the firm who had welcomed me with assurance the previous week suddenly appeared reluctant, as if frightened to take sides, and by the next morning, I could already sense the underlying uneasiness. Some heads of departments avoided making eye contact. I was aware of what was taking place. Ethan and my dad were employed at the Whisper Network. Senior executives, board members, old relatives, and pals. They were casting doubt on me by portraying me as aloof, cruel, and disloyal. In particular, Ethan had adopted the persona of the injured son, cheated on him by his own sister. I could see him sitting at a fancy restaurant today, pretending to be sad as he explained to our investors how I had taken the business away from my father and him. He would have very little to say, just a trembling head and a deep sigh. The words were positioned with care. All I ever wanted for my kids was the greatest. It was deliberate and risky, since they may force me out of my own firm, or at the very least prevent me from leading it, if they were able to turn my senior executives and board members against me. I had no intention of allowing it to occur. I convened an executive emergency meeting that afternoon. I could sense the tension in the air as soon as I entered the boardroom. Half the room stayed out of my line of sight. The other half kept a watchful eye on me, anticipating my lapse. At the head of the table, I sat down. "My chair," I said. "Let's not waste time. Even I am aware that my voice has been used in hushed tones, behind closed doors, and during cocktails." I let my gaze to wander throughout the room, stopping briefly on each individual to cause them to squirm uneasily. "I am also aware that some of you are unsure about the sustainability of my leadership." Some folks stiffened. Nobody said anything. I drummed my fingers on the high-gloss table. "Now let's get that straight." A presentation appeared on the screen behind me. Figures, information, facts. From a small, failing regional firm, I turned it into a $75 million industry leader. Under my direction, we have grown into 6 additional areas and had a 300% growth in sales over the past 5 years. I asked Paul, the CFO, whether there was any financial evidence that this business was struggling under my direction. After a moment of hesitation, Paul shook his head. The number. Indeed, forecasts indicate a further 20% rise in the upcoming quarter. I gave a nod. Thus, let's be truthful about the situation at hand. I bent over. The fact that the business is having trouble doesn't bother my father or brother. They don't care that I'm not doing well as a leader. They're angry because they thought that regardless of my qualifications or performance, I would resign and let Ethan take over. There was silence in the room. then I really dropped the bomb. Additionally, I am aware that some of you have received calls in the past 24 hours offering incentives to pressure me to leave. I cocked my head a bit. Now is the time for everyone there who wants to reveal such talks. Some of them shuffled uneasily. One of the top executives then cleared his throat. Following a protracted silence, he confessed that your father had called me. He stated that he was thinking about formally appealing to the board. Not surprised. I nodded. And did he provide you anything in exchange for your help? A slow nod, followed by a pause. It's there. I sighed and got to my feet. This company was built by my father, I added. I will not deny that. However, I went farther than he ever could, and I won't let him control it from a distance. I let my voice slip, a little restrained. Risky. He'll get a fight if he wants one. Gazing intently at each executive, I collected my documents. This is your chance to assert power if you think my father and brother should be in charge. Keep quiet. Nobody made a move. Excellent. I turned around and left. I held my head high. It was more than simply keeping me around. Making sure they never believed they could take it from me again was the goal of this. I made my own call that evening, not to an investor or a board member, but to the press. By morning, the headline power shift at Harper & Company appeared in every major news outlet's business section. In a skirmish in the boardroom, Lisa Harper outwitted the family. I had taken action. I was waiting for their turn now. My inbox blew up the morning after my story was published. Missed calls, emails, and texts from board members, investors, and journalists. A few were helpful. A few were wary. However, the majority of them shared a single query. Is it accurate? I waited for them. I was aware of my father's strategy. He had been honing his craft of public image for decades. He was aware of the importance of reputation in the corporate world. He would discredit me in public if he couldn't beat me in the boardroom. And he was attempting to accomplish just that. The initial counterattack came at midday. A well-written, well-organized press release that is full of false information. Harper & Company has always been a family-managed business. Although we are disturbed by recent events, we are still dedicated to maintaining the principles that founded our business. We anticipate a seamless transition as we go, but leadership changes are unavoidable. Though it was subtle, I understood its true meaning. Lisa is careless. Lisa is erratic. Lisa doesn't work well with others. It didn't surprise me. I was angry, though. I watched the news in my office while business analysts argued over my leadership. Was Lisa Harper's takeover too forceful? In the long run, the company suffered because of her lack of cooperation. Is she able to bounce back from this PR catastrophe? They spoke as though I wasn't paying attention, and as though I wasn't already preparing my next move, because I was going to give my father and Ethan a public war if they wanted one. I didn't make an announcement. A press conference was not called by me. Rather, I called an old acquaintance of mine who works in investigative journalism. I said, I have something for you, but you'll have to hurry. I forwarded emails, financial reports, internal records, and papers an hour later, providing proof that Harper & Company, led by my father, had participated in dubious business activities throughout the years. Within a day after I had spent the previous 10 years discreetly tidying up, the news broke. Behind Harper & Company's scenes, a history of financial cover-ups and concealed debts. It was a harsh article. My leadership was commended for improving the company's financial situation. It chastised my father for his previous poor management. Most significantly, it demonstrated that Harper & Company had only survived because of me. The storyline abruptly shifted after that. The board no longer questioned me. My father had nowhere to hide, and the investors ceased to hesitate. My father eventually gave me a call 2 days later. Before answering, I let the phone ring 3 times. Lisa, he murmured in a strained voice. We must speak. I reclined in my seat. Dewey. Quiet. Then a sigh at last. That wasn't necessary for you to accomplish. I gave a little chuckle. You didn't either. This firm was intended to have a legacy, he remarked, for the household, for both of you. A familiar aching went through me. There had been a small, stupid part of me that had also desired that. However, it is no longer the case. Dad, you should have trusted me with the legacy if you wanted me to protect it, I remarked gently. You attempted to take it away from me instead. Another lengthy stillness. Then, almost grudgingly, he inquired, Now what? I let out a slow breath. Right now? Right now. I ensured that they would never again have any influence on my business. The conflict was finished. My dad had lost. Both Ethan and I had vanished. I was victorious. However, I felt nothing but loneliness as I sat in my office and gazed out over the metropolitan skyline. I had fought for Harper & Company for 12 years, strengthening it, defending it, and building it up. However, even though I had gained my position, I had also lost something else. Thus, the price of that triumph was more than I had anticipated. My relatives. I entered the office the following day, as though nothing had happened, but the truth was known by everyone. The murmurs had ceased. The uncertainty had subsided. I was more than simply the CEO, Lisa Harper. I was Lisa Harper, the lady who had defeated her brother and father by outwitting them. I was revered by some for it. I was dreaded by some. And a little bit more, there were still some who awaited my fall. I waited for them. My father and I had our last conversation in the conference room at midday. He seemed worn out, older, as though he had finally come to terms with the consequences of what had transpired. When he did speak, I waited for him to do so first. I had never heard him speak so softly. "I'm retiring," he said plainly, with immediate effect. I didn't respond. This was what I had anticipated. "I'll sell what's left of my shares," he added. "As an investor, I will retain a modest portion, but I will no longer be involved." I closely examined him, and Ethan's jaw tensed. He is no longer there. My dad acknowledged that I accepted the buyout. He will not return. I had a sneaking suspicion it would end this way. Ethan had never had the strength to fight for himself. He had done what he always did once it became evident that he had lost: run. Even so, listening to it aloud caused a pain inside of me. Not regret, not guilt, the finality of everything. I gave a nod. "I get it." My dad let out a breath and rubbed his temple, like he was suffering from a headache. After a lengthy silence, he said something that caught me off guard. "You were underestimated by me." It was the closest I would ever get to an apology, but it wasn't one. Oddly enough, I discovered that I no longer need it. Harper & Company has completely changed its appearance within a month. The former board members who had sided with my father and Ethan are no longer there. Although the business had always been successful under my direction, it was now genuinely mine after the executives who had questioned my leadership left, and a new vision accompanied that control. I moved into businesses my father had been too cautious to pursue, upgraded systems he had deemed superfluous, and proposed ideas he had consistently refused. Profits skyrocketed in just 6 months. We surpassed the $100 million milestone in less than a year, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just battling to prove myself. I was struggling to create something that would never be taken away from me. I had dinner with my father a year after everything had transpired. It was our first conversation since Dad retired. He had changed appearance, less noisy. He wasn't angry anymore, just agreeing. I read about the most recent offer. Over his drink, he remarked, "You closed. It was a clever move." I smirked faintly. I know, a shadow of a smile graced his lips. There was no tension between us now. There is no more battle to wage. Only the basic, irrefutable truth. I had shown him how misguided his attempt to push me away was. "To Harper & Company," he murmured, raising his glass. I didn't feel resentful or angry as I clinked my glass against his this time. Just peace, because I already knew that I had won and didn't need his permission to realize it. I reflect on the things I've learned from this trip, including the fact that family can be your worst enemy, as I sit in my office now and gaze out over the city where I established my empire. Loyalty is a commodity, not a promise. That authority is never granted, it's already taken. Most crucial, though, is that sometimes putting aside your need for approval and focusing on creating something is the best way to demonstrate your value. So powerful that they will never be able to ignore you again. I don't regret anything. I want to make sure that no one ever forgets that Harper & Company are now mine. Story 4, "Caught my girlfriend boasting about cheating with my best friend," is the headline of this article. They lost everything and now I'm with his girlfriend. Hello everyone. Prior to the start of today's video, I need your assistance. One of the greatest ways you can help us out is to subscribe, since we've observed the channel is losing some of its popularity. It's simple, free, and helps us continue to provide you with amazing content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. All right, Reddit. I'm a 27-year-old man who has to write this down someplace because I'm now unable to discuss it with anyone in person. I'm typing this with trembling hands, but whatever. I've been dating this 24-year-old woman, Amy, for the past 2 years. She and I met at an upscale coffee shop close to my office building. This is the finance firm where I work. Since she could view this post, I won't mention which one. While completing her master's degree in marketing or whatever, she was employed there as a barista. To be honest, when I first saw her, I felt she was much beyond my level. She seemed to constantly recall everyone's instructions and had a flawless grin. A big caramel latte with an additional shot was what I had. Yes, I am aware of the basics. LOL. And before I reached the counter, she would have everything prepared. On most days, as she made beverages, we would discuss unrelated topics. Her lessons and my tedious work stories, nothing extraordinary. The parents of my family operate a large investment company in the heart of the city. Since I was around 12 years old, they have been pressuring me to carry on the family tradition. I completed the private school process and graduated from a reputable institution with a degree in finance. To show that I could succeed on my own, though, I went and took a job at one of their rival companies. That one made Dad very angry, lol. Compared to the girls I often met at work or at my parents' upscale business gatherings, Amy was completely different. They were constantly attempting to win favor with my family or obtain anything from me. However, Amy genuinely paid attention when I spoke, recalled tidbits of information about topics I had brought up weeks prior, and appeared to genuinely care about my opinions. She made no effort to conceal the fact that she was from a typical household. Her mother works at a dentist's office, while her father teaches high school. She was working at the coffee shop and taking on some side projects in web marketing to pay for graduate school. Her work ethic was something I greatly admired. Do you know? We established a routine where I would get at work just before the 8:15 morning rush, and she would always find time to talk for a few minutes, even when things were getting busy. I would gripe about my boss's obsession with Comic Sans and presentation slides while she would tell me about her crazy clients or this professor who was being mean to her. In retrospect, I should have seen that something was strange about her involvement in my circle of friends, particularly my 26-year-old closest buddy Jake. She would often comment on how awesome it was that he was working on starting his own gym, or inquire if he would be attending any events we planned. I assumed at the time that she was only being cordial and helpful to my closest buddy, but I was a fool guy. I've known Jake since high school. Together, we played football. He was good, really. I simply ended up at the same college after warming the bench. We've been almost brothers ever since he lived with me for 4 years. He's the type of man that befriends everyone, is extremely gregarious, constantly organizes things, and can be really charming when he wants to be. Jake was strangely thrilled when I told him about Amy and insisted that I ask her out since she seemed like the right person for me, offering to assist in organizing events and dates. I believed that he was only attempting to be a nice friend by helping his friend who is socially shy find a girlfriend. After frequenting Amy's coffee shop for almost 3 months, I eventually asked her out. Was somewhat anxious about it. I had this entire speech prepared, but I just ended up rambling. Want a fool as she handed me my coffee. Would you want to go out to supper sometime? Before I could even finish fumbling through the question, she answered yes. Jake assisted me in organizing this lovely supper at a restaurant owned by a client of his gym. That evening, Amy exuded genuine happiness. You know, that's what's so twisted up about all of this. She was so good at playing the role of the ideal girlfriend. When I was having trouble remembering crucial dates and other details, they would always send me good morning SMS and bring me lunch at work. When we went out, we didn't even glance at other males, except, evidently, for Jake, but I'll talk about that later. Thus, things proceeded really quickly once Amy and I began dating. We clicked immediately. She looked really pleased when I explained complicated market concepts and was quite interested in learning about my work, or at least seeming to be. I now understood that she was most likely only gathering information to determine how advanced her scheme was. Strangely, Jake was there from the beginning. In retrospect, he frequently visited the coffee shop when Amy was at work, claimed to be seeing clients there, but he would frequently stop by her counter to discuss his ideas for the gym. The fact that my closest buddy and girlfriend got along so well truly impressed me. Yes, I am aware that I am a fool. This gathering at my house was the first warning sign that I completely overlooked. About 3 months have passed. When I returned from grabbing food in the kitchen, Jake was using his phone to show Amy his training videos. She was glued to his screen, and they were seated very close. They all fell apart when they saw me, and Amy began to inquire about my day. Extremely noisy. I'm a fool. I assumed she was only being courteous. Jake began asking us to everything once we watched his videos of his improvement at the gym. Movie, evenings and fitness activities, beach excursions. We had to be there for a reason every time. These hangouts would make Amy very happy. She was always inquiring about Jake's opinion of her attire and whether he would find any food she brought impressive. I assumed she was only attempting to win over my buddies. About half a year later, because she was my girlfriend, Amy received a special rate when she began working out at Jake's gym and stated that she wanted to help his business. She would go at odd hours, such as late at night or very early before work. Said that those hours were the only ones that fit into her schedule. Jake is contacting her in the meanwhile regarding dietary plans, form checks, and other things. My coworker once saw them eating lunch together at this cafe close to my workplace. Amy told me that she accidentally ran into Jake, and they simply grabbed a short snack when I questioned her about it. Jake supported her account by claiming that he ran into her there while meeting a customer. They were prepared with this entire explanation. The portion that's truly messed up. I thought Amy was the ideal girlfriend during all of this. She always remembered significant dates, cooked my favorite meals, and left small messages in my work bag. She even created these Christmas cookies, perfectly using my mom's trade secret recipe. She was adored by my parents. Mom was already discussing potential wedding locations. I'm sorry, Mother. She didn't feel any kind of attachment to us. It was difficult to ask her about the strange connection between her and Jake because she was always there for me when I needed her. In particular, Jake's girlfriend. She won over everyone when I introduced her to my coworkers. Extremely professional at office gatherings, skilled at interacting with senior partners, and occasionally even assisted me in creating presentations. After meeting her, my supervisor claimed I was more focused and put together, so he started giving me better tasks. Jake was constantly complimenting me on my good fortune. You've come a long way from your ex, bro. Additionally, Amy will greatly advance your career. Such things. He had said she was a potential wife, therefore I should take it seriously. They were most likely making fun of me behind my back in the meanwhile. In about the 8th month, I even began to look at rings. Jake said he's an expert on what females want from his gym clientele, so he accompanied me to the jewelry store. At my birthday celebration, there was this one strange moment. Amy dressed up much more than was necessary for a laid-back house gathering. She repeatedly bumped into Jake in the kitchen while attempting to get him to notice her attire. Chris, a buddy, asked me whether I felt something was wrong after noticing. I vigorously defended them, claiming that Chris was seeing things that weren't there and that they were like siblings. Began to see that Amy would prepare for the gym as though she were heading to a picture session. Complete makeup exercise sets that match. She was constantly adjusting her hair, said that because she was seeing one of Jake's buddies, she wanted to appear professional. Jake said that his gym needed to maintain a particular image, so she even purchased new training attire. We went on several double dates with Jake and his girlfriend Lisa. After calm, Amy would act strangely, and Moody said that it was simply exhaustion from work or studying. I excused myself when Lisa saw how much Amy was looking at Jake, said that Amy was most likely simply dozing off due to her stress from graduate school. However, Amy started acting rather strange around 6 months ago. It was as though a switch had been flicked. It started with little things. It would take her ages to respond to the text. Began calling off our lunch appointments, claiming she needed to work more hours or study. However, at those very moments, I would see her sharing gym pics on Instagram. She also became quite possessive of her phone, as if I were to walk behind her while she was texting, she would actually jump. She carried it with her everywhere, even to the restroom, and kept it face down on the table. I once scooped it up after it dropped out of her pocket. Before I could even give it to her, she basically grabbed it out of my hands, claimed to have confidential business emails. She didn't want anybody to unintentionally notice. Instead, she gave up attempting to schedule anything with me. It became extremely intense at the gym. Before, she might have gone 3 times a week, but now she went every day. Occasionally, twice. When Jake was working, it had to be. Said that he was the only trainer that could relate to her fitness objectives or whatever. She would claim to have taken a shower at the gym because she had to rush to study group after arriving home quite late with damp hair. Jake's behavior changed. Too used to often email me about unrelated topics. Then he became rather aloof. Stopped attending our basketball games every week. I would see him sharing stories from bars and parties, but he always had an explanation about training customers. I didn't get the invitation. They never shared any photos of themselves together, but Amy was always in the backdrop of these images. I had this work party, and one pretty strange thing happened. Amy was expected to arrive. She always showed up for my job, since she understood how crucial it was to my career. However, she texted around half an hour prior, stating that she needed to stay at home due to a severe migraine. My supervisor was expecting to see her again, so I was a little unhappy. But whatever. We all get ill, don't we? My coworker gave me this backdrop gym tale that his girlfriend had posted when I was alone at this dull party. Amy and Jake can be seen exercising together. Later, when I questioned her about it, Jake was helping her by training her at the last minute, and she had an entire tale said about how exercise relieves her migraines. She even became upset with me for not advocating for her well-being. She also began to dress differently, similar to before. She was usually rather informal, sweaters and jeans, typical fare, but all of a sudden, she's purchasing expensive fitness attire and tight gowns. Said that in order to succeed in her future marketing position, she needed to seem more polished. However, she only wore this clothing when she was certain Jake would be present in the extremely disturbed area. She began to talk about Jake often, as if she would haphazardly bring him up in irrelevant situations. She would say, "Oh," Jake said, "this new Netflix show is really good," while we were discussing what to watch. Alternatively, Jake believes that Marvel films are becoming monotonous. When had she become so interested in Jake's film opinions? I chose to surprise her at the coffee shop where she worked since I believed I could be the issue. She had been under a lot of stress lately, so I came there at 3:30 with flowers because she typically works till 4. However, according to her coworker, she departed at 2 because she wasn't feeling well. Concerned, I contacted her, but the call went straight to voicemail. Jake is just barely visible in the mirror behind her when she shares this gym selfie later. She removed the post after I questioned her about it, claiming that her coworker must have misunderstood her schedule. The justification for learning grew stale. Although her Snapchat location indicated that she was in Jake's gym, she would claim to have been at the library till late. She became quite defensive when I brought this up, accusing me of being controlling and stalking her. Made me think that inquiring about it was ridiculous. Something was wrong. Even my mother noticed. She stopped answering her mom's texts, always claiming she was too busy with graduate school, although Amy used to text her often, asking for recipes and other things. However, she managed to spend around 2 minutes commenting on each and every one of Jake's Instagram postings. I became quite insecure, which is completely out of character for me. In an effort to be in better condition, I also started going to the gym more frequently. Amy was hardly aware. "Oh, that's lovely," she would simply remark. She didn't even raise her head from her phone. However, she would actually pause in the middle of a conversation to like and remark on a shirtless gym photo that Jake posted. All the indicators were choking me at that point, so I made the decision to take action. That afternoon, I wasn't even meant to be at home. I thought I may as well have coffee before returning from a work-related event that was abruptly canceled. I made my way to my vehicle. Then Amy's voice reached my ears. It began at a cafe close to my workplace. I didn't recognize the group of people she was seated with. They were most likely her coworkers. Her presence wasn't strange, but something about her quiet, almost reticent tone of voice stopped me cold. I don't usually eavesdrop, but for some reason I stopped. Amy was chatting loudly and giggling about how pitiful it was that she was the center of attention for everyone at my workplace. Said that my female coworkers were envious and that every time she came to visit, the boys couldn't stop gazing. She continued giggling as if it were all a great joke, discussing their bizarre chemistry and how Jake was much more interesting but also rather stupid, in contrast to me, how I seemed excellent on paper and was safe. Her true interest, though, was Jake. as well as her pals. They were laughing, joking, and demanding information on their workouts as if it were some drama from a reality show. I was trembling as I entered that cafe. Amy spotted me right away. Her expression hardly changed, just a moment of surprise before she forced a phony grin. "What are you doing here, baby?" She spoke far too loudly, as if this were completely typical. Amy's companions froze with wide eyes. She burst out laughing, as if I had interrupted the most hilarious exchange of words. "We were only making jokes. Girls are like that. We say the most bizarre things." Jokingly, I just gazed at her. "So while you play around with Jake, you're not really labeling me a dull placeholder?" Suddenly extremely interested in their phones, her pals began to clumsily assemble their belongings. Amy continued to act like that. She continued to force a giggle as she replied, "Oh my God, you're so sensitive." "Really?" It was simply female chat. Nothing more. Not a huge deal. There, I didn't argue. I just replied, "Yeah," as I wasn't going to let her perform. Not a huge deal. I then left. There was silence on the way home. She hardly gave me a glance, instead gazing out the window as if I had something to explain. She flipped as soon as we entered. "It's unbelievable that you created such a setting." She lost her temper. "I was humiliated by you." I shook my head and laughed a little. "Embarrassed you. You're the one discussing your own passion, and I'm simply a dull, safe stand-in. But show it if it's so harmless." She squinted. "What are you saying?" She had left her phone on the counter, and I took it out. "Jake, open your text. Read them aloud." Her entire face altered. "Are you serious?" She crossed her arms and sneered. "Do you want me to entertain you right now? This is really dominating. There's nothing to conceal," you said. "Read them then." I extended her phone. Or ought I to? As if I posed a threat. She grabbed the phone from me and pressed it to her chest. "This is crazy. A joke has you acting irrationally." But it wasn't a joke, as we both knew. Furthermore, she had no reason to read those texts. I then raised her phone, allowed it to look at her startled face, and immediately accessed her messages with Jake. As I scrolled, my hands were trembling. No direct admissions. No, "you are loved," or anything that would render this case closed. But the way they spoke, the late-night messages, and the inside jokes, it wasn't a harmless thing. It was excessive, too much like home. That's what made me crazy. Why did she say all that at the cafe if nothing was happening? Why pretend that Jake was some crazy, ardent secret? Well, I was just the handsome guy in pictures. I was unable to even gaze at her. She stood there calling my name as if I were the issue, but I threw her phone onto the couch and left. I wasn't only angry with her, though. More than anything else, I was furious with Jake. Ready to throw hands, I got into my car and drove directly to his place. He was there when the door opened. Lisa, his girlfriend, was too. Jake seemed truly perplexed, as if I had just arrived speaking a strange tongue. "What on earth are you discussing?" He questioned me as if I were a streetwise madman. "Amy is simply a client, guy. You're imagining things." And then Lisa jumped in, backing him up. "Jake would never do that to you," she replied, shaking her head like this was all some enormous misunderstanding. "He literally always speaks about how fantastic you and Amy are together. They made me feel like a complete idiot, that I had just blown up my own relationship over nothing." I left Jake's apartment feeling worse than when I went there. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe that was just gym talk. Amy kept driving it into my brain, saying I was ruining everything over some foolish jokes, but I couldn't shake the sensation. The way she talked in that cafe, the defensiveness, her conduct altered. The texts that weren't blatantly terrible, but yet felt wrong. There was a problem. I simply didn't yet know what it was. Either I'm overreacting, or they were purposefully making me nuts. Things were pretty strange after being left completely perplexed. Amy had a radical transformation, began bombarding me with love bombs. All of a sudden, I wanted to email you for hours about our next travel plans, months in advance. Then she would make a mistake. As though every time Jake's name was mentioned, she would become extremely anxious, or swiftly shift the topic if someone brought up the gym. She even informed me she would block Jake everywhere and quit coming to the gym. I would feel more at ease stating that she only cares about me, if that were the case. Jake's manipulation was much worse. Began asking me to everything, workouts and get-togethers. Even wanted to organize a trip for Lisa, Amy, and myself as a pair. Then I received a letter from this girl named Maria from Amy's workplace, who stated she felt bad for being silent. It seems that Jake's training pauses coincided well with Amy's extended lunch breaks. Amy's work calendar had several meetings checked off that didn't exist, according to screenshots Maria shared. Amy lost it when I showed her the screenshots. He began to weep, claiming that I was ruining everything by not trusting Maria and that she was jealous of her success. I also received messages from her friends accusing me of being harsh and domineering by looking into her. Jake played it flawlessly as well, acting worried when I suggested that my trust difficulties could require therapy. Jake was concerned about my paranoid behavior, Lisa would tell me. I felt insane for having any suspicions. The worst thing? Some of our friends began to sympathize with them, claiming that I was exaggerating over some innocuous flirtation at the gym. One buddy really stated, "Maybe you should forgive them and move on, even if something did happen," such as, I was on the verge of believing them. I was on the verge of believing I was dreaming. The last straw, however, was when I chose to use Mike, one of the other trainers, to gain access to the gym's CCTV footage. I wanted to know whether my paranoia was genuine. Amy entered Jake's private training area late at night after the facility was closed, according to the video. She would depart looking unkempt 2 or 3 hours later. This occurred more than once a week. When I made another attempt to confront her, she claimed that I was sexualizing innocent workouts while they were engaged in rigorous training sessions. Jake fully supported her account, stating that several people arrived for individual instruction after hours. Lisa went so far as to defend him, claiming that Jake was too professional to play around with customers. Everyone thought I was going crazy because of them. It goes without saying that I felt that was total bullshit. I spent almost 2 hours that night sitting in my car thinking, have I realized something? Whether they were hooking up was no longer important. There was no longer any trust. When I heard Amy disparaging my name, I became horrified with her. I was becoming someone that I didn't like, looking at surveillance video and checking phones, doubting everything, unable to fall asleep, unable to concentrate at work. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. I decided then and there. It was over when I texted Amy, said that I could no longer be with someone I didn't trust. Before she could reply, I blocked her number, blocked Jake as well, didn't even attempt to explain the reason. I instructed my doorman to keep both of them out of my flat. I received this email from a blank account 3 days after I ended my relationship with Amy. Only a Google Drive folder, URL. At this point, what did I have to lose, guys? I nearly deleted it because I thought it was spam, but the subject line showed that Jake and Amy clicked it. Everything was in this folder. Hundreds of screenshots from more than a year ago showing Jake's private communications with his gym friends, security camera footage, gym footage, and even audio recordings of their chats in his office. It turns out that there were other trainers who shared Mike's suspicions. The true story was revealed in the mails. Since the day I introduced them, Jake had been completely enamored with Amy. He would text his pals to say that he had to have her and that it was agonizing to see her with me. Guy was actually keeping track of her workout routine and modifying his training sessions to coincide with hers. The most crazy aspect? Despite what Amy boasted to her pals, she wasn't the one chasing him. Everything had been manipulated by Jake from the beginning. He would say things like, "We have this special connection, and he doesn't understand you like I do." Traditional, predatory material. He boasted in several of the messages about how he was gradually making Amy hate me. When she became furious, he would seem all supportive while fabricating stories about me chatting to other females at work, would chuckle about kidnapping his best friend's girl, and email his pals screenshots of our texts. Worse was the security footage. Jake is seen following Amy around the gym, always looking for excuses to observe her exercises or assess her form. If other trainers spoke to her, he would get quite protective, instructed the front desk staff to notify him each time she checked in. However, Jake was playing both sides flawlessly. He would write me lengthy texts expressing his concern over Amy's inappropriate behavior at the gym, giving the impression that she was the source of the issues. As he watches me go crazy and tries to understand what's going on, he's telling his pals how much fun it is. Lisa didn't know. At night, Jake would really get out of bed and message Amy to express his desire for her. Without Amy's knowledge, he would show his gym buddies footage of her working out and referred to her as his future bride. While preparing his proposal to Lisa, He discovered in their group chat that Jake had already done this. Jokes about how this was simpler than the prior time were included in the communications. Because he had the ideal cover as my best buddy, it seems that he has used the same tactic with his friends' women, first becoming close to the encouraging friend and then gradually controlling them. Amy wasn't blameless in all of this. She gradually began to comply, taking pleasure in the attention and drama according to the messages. Jake was obviously the genius, though. Before Lisa claimed she attempted alerting other females about Jake, he always managed to spin it as though she was insane and envious. The anonymous email turned out to be from Jake's ex. After witnessing him begin the same pattern with Amy, she had been collecting evidence for months and gave it all to Lisa. She had a right to know what sort of man she was standing up for. Jake's entire persona as a flawless trainer was a farce. He wasn't a diligent, self-made individual. He was only snooping on his clients' girlfriends and expanding his clientele by exploiting her dad's contacts at the gym. What's the worst? I had faith in him. We were more than simply workout partners. In fact, I thought of him as a buddy. When he was accused of being arrogant, I spoke up for him. I believed he was solid, so I let him coach Amy, someone who supported me. As he chased after my girlfriend behind it, it turned apparent that he was grinning in my face. I felt foolish when I saw all the tiny warning signs that I had disregarded. Amy was no longer the exclusive focus of this. This had to do with discovering that a man I thought of as a friend had been deceiving me all along. I sent Lisa everything, but I didn't hear back for almost 2 days. Then all of a sudden there were so many alerts on my phone. Lisa went crazy and shared all the proof on social media for their gym. Every eerie communication Jake sent regarding Amy, every screenshot, every offensive remark he made regarding his female customers. Jake's flawless image took a serious hit. His female clients all canceled right away. It turns out that he had also been discreetly filming their exercises. Extremely unlawful. On the same day, Lisa's father barred Jake from all of their gyms and closed his trainer account. The finest thing, though, was Amy learning the truth. Lisa forwarded her all the texts that demonstrated how Jake had taken advantage of her, including the ones in which he labeled her easily manipulated and made fun of her for genuinely thinking he would leave her for her. Screenshots of him explaining to his fellow gym patrons that he was gathering a female from another pal for his trophy wall. Amy went totally crazy, like a complete meltdown, began yelling as they arrived at Jake's apartment that he had promised to be with them. She had to be taken out twice by security. Until Jake's attorney ordered her to stop, she continued to publish lengthy tirades about their genuine love on Instagram. This is when things start to get interesting. Began receiving texts from Jake's former pals. It seems that he had done the same thing with 3 other pals. While gradually controlling their girlfriends, girlfriends would pose as the encouraging best friend. Once he was discovered to have this entire system, he proceeded to ghost everyone. He would go for buddies who had something to prove and had gorgeous women, similar to Amy's attempt to blend in with my finance world. He would gradually persuade them that their lover was preventing them from moving on by playing the sympathetic buddy, then hook them with that insecurity. Lisa is taking charge of matters such as a boss who reported the illegal gym recordings, informed all of their common acquaintances about his actions, and even forewarned his new gym about his past. She really contacted me last week, asking to compare notes on all of his falsehoods and get coffee. It felt strange at first to meet Lisa for coffee, but it worked out wonderfully. We discussed all the warning signs we overlooked for hours, ended up attending supper as well. We're both moving very slowly, but there's undoubtedly something there. Both require time to comprehend all of this bizarre information. Amy isn't doing well. Honestly, the screenshots indicate that once Jake hooked her, she was quite into the whole thing. She attempted to message me a lengthy apologies for being duped. She cherished the attention and the drama. Since everyone at her previous employment is aware of what transpired, she is now forced to work at her parents' business. When the illicit recordings were made public, Jake's life fell apart and he lost his training license. The guys at the gym betrayed him. He attempted to make a comeback at a little gym across town after Lisa revealed everything. However, after seeing Lisa's article, the owner was dismissed by his daughter. The most bizarre aspect? There are now more girls coming forward. For years, Jake has been doing this. His buddies' girls are his constant target, performing the same helpful buddy role all the time. On his computer, He had a vast collection of images and films from previous battles. Very eerie thing. Jake lives with his brother in a different state, as far as I've heard. Continues to share these phony gym-inspiring stories, but the fact is now well known. Despite Amy's persistent attempts to reach him, he has blocked her everywhere. I suppose that now that everyone is aware of his game, she isn't that unique. I have been spending more time with Lisa. It's good to have someone who truly knows what it was like to be duped by Jake, even if it's not serious yet. With all of this, we're both in therapy. It turns out that having someone you completely trusted betray you seriously damages your mental health. And indeed, I am here at this very moment. This will likely be my final update. Though I feel like Amy won't leave me alone, I'm going to concentrate on moving on and taking lessons from everything. The last update. Hello everyone. I'm writing this on a Hawaiian beach. I made the decision to buy a nicer engagement ring with the money I had saved after all had transpired. A vacation of 2 weeks. I brought Lisa along. Yes, that is going rather nicely. In addition to hiking and surfing, we've been enjoying our time away from the drama back home. First, a little update on everyone else. It seems like Jake works for a protein shake company in Nevada. With everything out, his Instagram following fell from 50,000 to about 500. Post these depressing, motivating sayings nonetheless. But no one is buying his phony guru act anymore. Amy relocated to a different state to live with her cousin. She attempted to launch a fitness Instagram account, but she was forced to keep it private after receiving constant comments concerning Jake's predicament. The last I heard, she was doing crystal healing or something to discover who she was. Lisa has been outstanding with this entire ordeal. In the beginning, we moved quite slowly. Many lengthy discussions on limits and trust. You see, she understands. Both of us were duped by somebody we fully trusted. However, we are assisting one another in healing rather than allowing it to make us resentful. A humorous tale. We nearly didn't make the reservation. It was strange for them to go on vacation together so quickly. Jake then posted some nonsense about how real players never give up and decide to just muck it up. Instead of allowing him to continue to influence us, let's create some joyful memories. Lisa and I laughed a lot about warning signs we didn't see, including Jake's strange involvement in his friends' relationships, his constant advice, which frequently resulted in breakups, or the fact that he seemingly always dated ladies whose fathers owned gyms or sports businesses. These two fish were swimming together while we were snorkeling yesterday. Lisa jokingly said that their love story was definitely superior than Jake's made-up romantic tales. We've been using comedy a lot to recover. That turns out to be more effective than anger. Mike, the trustworthy trainer from the previous gym, messaged me yesterday to let me know that Jake attempted to apply at his new job. Mike presented the owner with all the proof, and Jake was turned down right away. I suppose karma continues to work itself out. I'm going to concentrate on developing a positive relationship with Lisa right now, advancing professionally and perhaps organizing other beach getaways. Next time, consider Bali. I appreciate all of your help. Reddit. I would especially like to thank everyone who advised me to follow my instincts when I originally shared that I had heard Amy at that cafe. I escaped a gunshot thanks to you people, and instead I happened onto something genuine. Told Doctor. While Jake is in Nevada making protein shakes, and Amy is someplace doing crystal therapy, I'm living my greatest life in Hawaii with Lisa. Losing phony individuals might occasionally lead to finding real ones.